Week 4 has begun. Week 4 climax is on Sunday night in the return of Tom Brady to New England. But this is going to be a great weekend of football, Peter. And we got a perfect appetizer on Thursday night. Unexpected. Thursday night's game was like being at one of those fancy parties where they carry around the trays of finger food, and you look at it and you think, I don't know what that is, and I really don't think I'm going to like it. And then you pick it up and you take a bite. Like, that's pretty damn good. That was Thursday night's game in a nutshell.
You know what you are, Mr. Metaphor. That's what you are. Anybody
That's
ever
the
called
nicest
you
thing
Mr.
anyone's.
Metaphor?
That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me.
Well, Mike, all I know is this. After the Bengals win last night, okay, some things in the NFL are everlasting. The Giants, Jets, Jags, Lions are 0-13 as we enter October. And the Bengals, of course, are all alone in first place in the AFC North. And the Kansas City Chiefs, of course, are all alone in last place in the AFC West. So everything is exactly how we pictured it was going to be 1 month ago.
And what's amazing is, and you're absolutely right, because someone pointed out to me via email overnight that preseason, the win totals that are projected by the folks in Vegas, the over-under, for the Bengals, it was 6.5. That's looking pretty damn good right now as they're 3-1 on October 1. For the Jaguars, if you bet the under 6.5, that's looking pretty damn good right now, given that they're 0-4 and they got 13 games left, and they got to go 7-6 to hit the number over 6.5. And I don't see that happening. They just need to worry about the Titans coming to town in 9 days, because if they lose that one, they become the third team in NFL history to lose 20 in a row. Isn't that amazing? 102 seasons of professional football, and only 2 teams have lost 20 in a row, and the Jaguars are on the brink of being number 3.
I think that is incredible, especially because the Jaguars, when I watch them, and obviously last night they're not playing the 27 Yankees, but you watch them, and that was a competitive team last night. And look, they're in a division where they ought to be able to get some wins, and I agree with you. They're not winning 7 games. They're in a division where they ought to be able to get some wins. You know, the suddenly toothless AFC South for the most part. But I think, Mike, the one takeaway I would have from last night, and I said this at the beginning of the year, I said, look, to me, Joe Burrow is going to turn out to be this generation's Dan Fouts. And it's because at halftime of that game last night, the Bengals were your father's Bengals. They were pathetic. They were awful. They were typical Cincinnati, all that. And Joe Burrow doesn't stand for that crap. He just doesn't. And Joe Burrow, I don't know what he did, if anything, at halftime, but you can tell that the players on that team have an immense amount of respect for a second-year player. And to me, look at that. 253 yards in the second half. I just think right now we are watching the dawn of a great quarterback career. Now, can you be a Cincinnati Bengals quarterback in this era and eventually make the Hall of Fame? I don't know that. I found 30 years being on that committee that where you begin your career has an awful lot to do with whether your career ends up in Canton or not. But Joe Burrow right now looks to me like he's going to be a top 5 quarterback in the league, top 7 or 8 at the very least, for a long, long time.
Yeah, Achilles Smith would agree with you on that, but ultimately it comes down to changing narratives and winning championships. Tom Brady changed the narrative in New England. They were a team that had never won a championship until he got there. Joe Montana changed the narrative in San Francisco. They'd never won a championship until they got there. Let's go all the way back to Terry Bradshaw. the Steelers in 42 years of existence had never won an NFL championship until Terry Bradshaw got there. So it's about turning the page hard, making a new reality for a team that has a prior existence that was baked in and causing everyone to view that team differently. And Burrow could do that. Burrow definitely could do that. The big concern about him going into the season was the ACL tear so late in the year in 2020. The concern that mentally it was going to be a hurdle. The Carson Palmer seeing ghosts around that left leg when you have it out there and bodies are around it. He's been unaffected, Peter. It's a non-issue. I think we were set up. I think it was a rope-a-dope by Joe Burrow to get people thinking that he was going to be affected in some way because he looks exactly the same way he did last year before the injury.
Well, here's the interesting part of it, Mike. You know, Joe Burrow didn't only have the torn ACL. He had more damage in his knee than that. And he had his surgery 10 months before the start of this season. So I often viewed in the offseason, you know, when I was talking to some people close to Burrow in the offseason, and they really wanted the Bengals to slow play his return. So the way I've sort of looked at Burrow is I've looked at him with low expectations to start the season. Quite honestly, I did not see him playing well enough to win at Pittsburgh, and he did. You know, neither of the other wins that they've had have been particularly shocking. You know, but I do think winning at Pittsburgh is sort of slaying the dragon that, you know, the Bengals have always played poorly in Pittsburgh. So I kind of look at him and say, if this is what he's done in the first quarter of the season, look out for what he's going to do the rest of the season.
Now, you mentioned halftime, and I want to talk about that in a minute. It's prior to halftime that had me concerned as it occurred, because I'm not deep into the analytics weeds, but I'm a firm believer that if you have a chance to go up 3 scores in a game, you take it. Because there's really not much of a difference between 17-0 and 21-0. You're up 3 scores either way. The other team that has not scored yet the entire night has to score 3 times to catch you when you're up by 17 or more. 17's the number. 16's a 2-score game. 17's a 3-score game. And I say that because the Jaguars had the opportunity to go up 17-0. They got cute. They went for it. It didn't work. And they were only up 14-0. And Peter, I think, and I'm asking you this because you've covered the NFL a lot longer than I have. I believe that psychologically, going into the locker room 14-0 and stopping them from scoring anymore is far different than being behind 17-0. I know as a fan over the years, team you were rooting for falls down 17 points. You're like, gosh, almost said a bad word. Oh, crap, it's done. 17, forget about it. Do you think, and I know, hey, hindsight's 20/20, so what? That's why hindsight's so accurate. Do you think they should have just taken the 3 and gone into the locker room with a 17-0 lead? And how different would the vibe have been for the Bengals if they were down 17 instead of 14?
Well, 3 points. Number one, no, I don't think it was a mistake. I think it was the right call to go for it. You're close. You know that you are either going into halftime up 14-0 or up 21-0, and you go for the lottery. In my opinion, the reason that Urban Meyer did that is because he was telling his team, A, I trust you, and B, he was also telling his team, Cincinnati's explosive. They got Burrow to Jamar Chase, and they could kill us in the second half. We know that, so we need to get as many points as we can. The risk, I think it was obviously a risk, but to me, that's a 70% make it play, I think, making 1 yard in that situation. Number two, thought it was a lousy call, play call, because I don't want, unless, when I want my quarterback sneaking, okay, when you can sneak the way Tom Brady sneaks, when you extend the ball over the line and, you've done that. If that's what Joe Burrow did, if that's what If that's what Jacksonville did in that particular case, if they were to call on that one, I would have said that's fine. But when Trevor Lawrence didn't just try to do it that way, I didn't like that call. But the last thing I would say about this thing is I think it's really interesting to realize when you look at all the decisions that were made in that moment, I just really believe that it's Urban Meyer saying, I'm not going to be afraid. And again, it didn't turn out good. It didn't turn out well. And it turned out to be a big factor in the game. But I would also say, Mike, if they kick a field goal to go up 17-0 and they score once in the second half the way they did, it not only wouldn't have guaranteed victory, but it might have guaranteed overtime. So, we'll never know, but I had no problem with going for it. I just didn't love the call.
As to the call, Trevor Lawrence, when he was asked about it last night in the post-game press conference, he said we were all good with it, and it was something that we had run all week. We were all on the same page. So that was the play they had in their pocket ready to go. So it wasn't spur of the moment. They were going with that. And I just think you got to walk before you run. And all of a sudden, Urban Meyer, I'll give you another metaphor. He's like that kid that gets the bike going finally after failing over and over again, and you finally start to get that wobble worked out, and you say, hey, I got this, and you crash into a tree. I just think you've got to ease your way into it, and I think 17, I just think psychologically 17 is so much more powerful than 14.
But Mike, let me ask you this question. I'll go against you like this. So if you take Trevor Lawrence at his word, and this was a play that they loved, and they had practiced it during the week, either as a 2-point play after a touchdown or as a goal line play at any point on the goal line. And if you go into the game loving it, if during the week in practice you ran it 3 times and it worked and I don't know how often they practice it, but if they were very confident in it, and then it's fourth and goal at the 1-yard line, and you send the field goal unit out. If you're Trevor Lawrence, aren't you looking at Urban Meyer like the dog looks when he hears the strange sound, and he says, "What are we doing here?" And when I heard what he said after the game, that was my first thought. That we practiced it, it looked good, we repped it, we loved it, and then if Urban Meyer hadn't have called it, I think if I was the offense, I would have said, you don't trust us.
I just don't know why anyone would think a play like that would look good in practice when the quarterback's got a red jersey on and he's going against a scout team, not the first team defense of the opposition.
Good point. That's a good point, too. Yeah.
So, anyway, you raised the question earlier of what did Joe Burrow do at halftime. Zach Taylor had a message at halftime that apparently worked. Here's Taylor from after the game on the message that he had to the team when they went into the locker room down 14-0.
The message was they had really beat us in all 3 phases. We had not played great football. They genuinely beat us in all 3 phases. So we took, whether or not it's their best shot, I don't know. But it sure felt like it. And we were not playing good football. And you had a whole second half to play. So there's no reason to panic. Nobody did. Everybody was calm, cool, and collected. They knew that we were going to get the ball to start the half. We're usually pretty efficient in that. And they just trusted that we're going to come together. And I just told them, we always preach a connected team. That's what you want. This team is so connected right now. Just the brotherhood is so tight. It's so awesome to watch these guys celebrate with each other. They believe in each other. We've done it a lot of different ways at this point through 3 victories. And that's just going to help us as the season moves on.
Peter, I don't know what to think about halftime adjustments for any NFL game other than the Super Bowl, where you have a half hour to engage in extensive analysis, discussion, and planning for the second half of the game. With 12 minutes, I don't know what you can really do. And I wonder if Urban Meyer has even gotten used to that, going from 20 at the college level down to 12 at the NFL level. You can barely go into the locker room, catch your breath before it's time to go back out. Think about last week. They have that fluke 109-yard return for a touchdown right before halftime. How do you process all of that and get yourself reconfigured? And now, last night, look, whatever the Bengals did or the Jaguars didn't do, it was a completely different second half in comparison to the first half.
Mike, the Mannings the other night on the ESPN telecast of that game talked a little bit about that, what you're talking about. And their point was there's no time to do anything really significant at halftime, the proverbial halftime adjustments. And I've always thought that. I've always thought, hey, the coach has 90 seconds to send a message to his team. And Zach Taylor, it probably took him 30 seconds. I remember once asking Andy Reid about this back when he was in Philadelphia, and he basically said, there's no time to do anything in there. And other than, let's say, Zach Taylor going up to Joe Burrow and saying, hey, listen, this stuff that we had on the play sheet coming in, let's kill X, Y, and Z, and here's what I'm thinking in the second half. What do you think? Yeah, let's do that. I just don't think there is time to overhaul what you do. And you make a very good point about Urban Meyer. He is still adjusting to these, to the pro game from the college game. And I was reminded, sort of listening to his words last night, I was really reminded of his NFL mentor, Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson, so many times in 1989, would walk into those press conferences, and I'm telling you, he would look like his dog just died. And that's, Urban Meyer's got to be careful now. There's 17 of these games. You knew you weren't going to be good in the first year, whether you admitted that to yourself or not. And look, Trevor Lawrence now, what's the stat, Mike? He's already lost as many games now as he lost in high school and college, or it's something like that. And so, I mean, this is beyond a totally new world. The one thing that Myers said last night that really resonated with me is that, and I know because I was in their training camp, they had a major mantra of let's get turnovers. We got to win the takeaway battle. We got to win the turnover margin, blah, 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 blah. They're -8 after 4 weeks, and they're 0-4. Ergo.
Well, and you mentioned that there's 17 games. Actually, in Meyer's mind, and this is part of the adjustment to the pro game as well, he still viewed it as 20 because in his mind, a preseason game is still a game. That's the kind of adjustment he needs to make. And let me try to thread this needle on the whole halftime issue before we move on, and we'll hear from Meyer postgame. There isn't time to do anything, so you have to make the most out of the time you have. And Zach Taylor did what he had to do in his 30 to 90 seconds that he was able to talk to the team. He did what he had to do in the limited chance that he had to grab Joe Burrow and say, here's what we're throwing overboard, here's what we're focusing on, we got to come out here. They gave us an opening. It's 14-0. We get the ball first. This is what we're going to do on the first drive. We cut this lead in half, and we're back in it. That kind of thing. You don't have much time, so the challenge is find a way to make maximum possible use of it. And clearly something happened, or didn't, for one team, because here we are, completely new ball game. Bengals come back and win it on a walk-off field goal. Here's Urban Meyer after the game. Let's assess how Urban's doing after not 4 but 7 difficult NFL games.
I've said this from day one, is that the core of this team are good players, and I thought we brought in some good players, and we're getting better each week. We are getting better each week. Just sickening that you didn't win that thing. But like I told you, I'm not wrong about that. I'm not wrong about those guys in that room, and they're gonna keep swinging as hard as they possibly can.
I think the challenge now, and it's easier for us to say it because we don't have to do it, you got a couple of extra days to get ready instead of wallowing in the fact that we could have had it, and we blew it. You focus on the positives coming out of that game, the reasons to have confidence that when the Titans come to town 9 days from now, you can beat them. And that's the challenge. And you give the players 24 hours to wallow in self-pity and, oh, woe is us. But they better wake it up, Peter, because – and I don't know that anyone in that locker room is thinking about 20 in a row because 15 of them attached to a different regime, although plenty of those players were there for the 15, including a guy like Miles Jack. But they have an opportunity here because they showed us enough last night that they can be competitive and they can win games. They just can't let what happened last night spill over into next week.
Yeah, and look, as far as losing 20 in a row, this is just, I don't know exactly if this is correct, but there's got to be 25 new guys on that team from last year. And every one of them, when the press asks them about it next week, is going to say, I have no idea what you're talking about. I just got here 3 months ago. I own 4 of those. I don't own 19 of those. That's exactly what I would say. And if I were their media trainers, that's exactly what I would tell them to say. And look, I'll go back to one other Jimmy Johnson thing. Jimmy Johnson always knew. And the one thing that I like about what Urban Meyer is saying right now, even though he appears to be so despondent, and, that's the way life is when you're head coach in the NFL and you're used to winning. But the one thing I liked about what Jimmy Johnson said, he said, we're going to be good, and we're going to be damn good. I will never forget sitting with Jimmy Johnson in a restaurant in La Jolla, California, in the 1990 training camp season. I think they were practicing against the Chargers for a few days. And I went out and got a bite to eat with him. And as we were eating, he said, Peter, we're going to be good. We are going to be big time good. And I'm thinking to myself, this is a guy with a 1-15 record who at the end of his rookie year in the NFL disappeared to the point where nobody could find him for a few days. Nobody knew he was in the Bahamas, by himself, just basically wallowing in his misery. And again, I only share that because, in my opinion, that's not what I see in Urban Meyer.
Well, look, they better start building that legacy that he thinks they can sooner rather than later. And I don't know how he would survive 1-16 or 0-17. And I don't think they're going to go winless. I don't think any of the winless teams are going to go winless. You get an extra opportunity to win this year that you didn't have last year. I think it's a lot more of an accomplishment, if accomplishment is even the right word, to go winless. But we know from Meyer's history, that's the difference between Meyer and Johnson. Johnson didn't have the history at the college level of burning out, flaming out, health reasons or health reasons at Florida and Ohio State. That's the difference, and that's what everyone's watching for. That's the history is baked in 2 different places with Meyer, and when you see him despondent like that, you wonder if he's got the wherewithal to stick it out until the thing turns. Because for Johnson, it took 3 years before it started to turn. They got to the playoffs in his 3rd season. But his 2nd season, they weren't dramatically better than they were in his 1st season. I just wonder if Meyer, given his age, given his experience, given everything we know about him, is going to have that same kind of stubborn, dug-in, I don't care that we were 1-15. We got this thing. I don't know that he's going to have that same attitude, and I think no one will know until we get on the other side of whatever happens this season.
Well, Mike, the other thing that Urban Meyer doesn't have, he doesn't have a trade chip like Herschel Walker to make you very, very confident about the future. Because remember, the Cowboys were in mid-October of that horrible first year of Jimmy Johnson. And he and Jerry Jones and he and Jerry Jones, however you want to, split the baby there, basically got Mike Lynn of the Vikings to vastly overpay and to cause Mike Florio to curl up in a fetal position and say, oh no, we've ruined the future. And you know what? I would bet that you didn't do that. I would bet, by the way, that when you got Herschel Walker and you saw him in his first game in the Metrodome go crazy.
When the shoe went off.
Or whatever.
Remember?
I was there.
The shoe went off.
134 yards. Yeah. I bet you were pretty darn happy then. Forget the future. I love having Herschel. We're winning it all this year.
I was in my second year of law school. I had been to see the Vikings play for the first time in my life earlier that year in Pittsburgh after Pittsburgh had been blown out 51-0 by the Browns, lost 48-17 or something like that to the Bengals. The Vikings were a Super Bowl contender. The Steelers beat them, which was one of the longest 3-hour stretches of my life at the time. But the perception was, hey, running back away, that's all they need, running back away from being a true contender. And, yeah, that first game against Green Bay, there was the memorable play where the shoe came off, and it's like, oh, this is exactly what they needed. And then it just gradually crumbled. And meanwhile, the Cowboys used all those picks and all those players that they then abruptly dumped to get more picks. I mean, it was a genius trade.
Yeah.
I could see why Jimmy Johnson was so confident. But you're right, Peter. The Jaguars got nobody that they could even begin to consider flipping for that kind of a haul that would lay the foundation for the drafts and the players and the guts of a team that could end up winning 3 Super Bowls in 4 years. So it's going to have to be something that's done in a more difficult fashion than what the Cowboys did. Speaking of difficult, let's get back to the second half of the Bengals' victory. And as we pointed out earlier, Joe Burrow, 253 yards in the second half, connecting with Jamar Chase. The last drive, though, let's focus on that. And we got some sound from Zach Taylor, Joe Burrow, and C.J. Uzomah, who had the catch and the run on the audible that set up the field goal. Let's hear from all three of them about what culminated in that game-winning field goal.
They zero blitzed us because I don't know how many empty plays we ran, but it was a lot. And I don't know if the ball ever hit the ground. So if I'm them, they had to try something different, and they zeroed us, and Joe was ready for it.
So that was the second play call that you gave him 2?
I didn't give him. I gave him 1.
Okay.
He got us to 2.
And you guys have heard me talking about just having the playbook in the back of my head, seeing looks that I can take advantage of, and that just comes with experience. And they gave me a 0 look, and so all week I know defensive coordinator had a Baltimore background. They showed some 0 on film. I knew I'd have to be ready for it in a big spot. And, I had CJ out there. That's not exactly the personnel that we usually throw those jailbreak screens to, but, he really took advantage of the opportunity. And, I had those plays in the back. Thank you. I had those plays in the back of my head, expecting 0, and I just got to it and didn't really think about it.
I'll be honest, I had to double take that one. Because that one was something I was like, wait, hold on. What did you just call? And TB was looking at me too, like, what did you just call?
That's the second time in 3 wins so far this year that Joe Burrow improvises, calls a play, and Uzomah ends up getting the ball, and it sets up the game-winning field goal. 2 times now in 3 of their victories. It's Burrow using his brain, not his arm, not his legs, just his brain to get the Bengals into the right spot.
And that's what, this is what has been so impressive to me about Joe Burrow. Watch this. You've got basically a very, very heavy rush. And he has the presence of mind and the courage because he knows that he's probably going to get nailed right there. And he has the presence of mind to basically say, okay, I'm going to stick in there and I'm going to make this throw and we're going to get a first down on it. And that's what, to me, has been so impressive about Joe Burrow. You can't throw a lot of things at him that are going to frustrate him. Look, he's not going to be ultimately successful all the time. No quarterback is. Tom Brady has had many failings over 2 decades of playing football. But you hang in, and you know that what you do is going to work. And it's not going to work every Sunday. You're going to lose some games. But to me, that's what that play showed me about Joe Burrow. He knew what was coming, and he knew on a 0 blitz. Here's the thing, Mike. Even on a 0 blitz, the great quarterbacks will tell you, I have an answer. Drew Brees always used to say that, like if he gets a 0 blitz, hey, I've got solutions. Sean and I have worked on things. I've got solutions. This play is a perfect example. I've got solutions on a 0 blitz. The great thing about that play is that the legal picks in the NFL today that are allowed that you don't get flagged for. That also allowed that to happen. And, Mike, at the beginning of the year, everybody said Zach Taylor, whatever. He's on the hot seat, and he's got to have a good year, and he's got to do that. That play is such a perfect example of what happens if you hang in there with a coach and you give him a chance and you allow his system to mature with those players, because 3 players did a great job on that play. I did not see whoever the blocker was, who basically screened out Ozuma so that he could get the catch to get the first down and to get him in field goal position. And obviously Joe Burrow. So to me, I thought that game last night was really encouraging for the Cincinnati Bengals. And as I watch that game, I don't care who it's against, but as I watch this game, I want you to just watch. You see the little screen that is done right there to prevent the slot corner from coming over and getting Ozuma, or maybe it's a safety. You can't tell by this. But look at that screen. And that is a great play that no one will talk about. I guess I can't even read the number here on my monitor, Mike. But that's a great play that no one will talk about. But it was a huge part of why this play gained whatever it gained, 25 yards.
Yeah, it's number 16 for the Bengals. I think that's a guy that popped up with a catch at one point during the second half. We'll effort the name so we can give number 16 the appropriate praise that he deserves. But, people who aren't zealous all-in football fans, and most of the folks who watch this show are, most of the folks who watch this show know what a zero blitz is, but basically it means they're sending people, there's no safety, it's man-to-man coverage, and that's when you start manipulating picks. Offense will call it a screen, defense will call it a pick. Bottom line is there was a very well-timed and ultimately legal, because no flag was thrown, pick that was made to spring Uzama. But people will also say, well, you hear about guys putting in film study. What does film study really matter? Well, obviously, to a guy like Joe Burrow, who's grinding and grinding and grinding and grinding, he made the comment, hey, their defensive coordinator's got a Baltimore background. We know that this is what they do. I mean, it's already having in his brain, Peter, the reservoir of ideas on how to deal with whatever looks that are given to him. That's something that usually happens later in a career, not in your second season.
Mike, I thought that was a brilliantly prescient statement by Joe Burrow. You know why? Because, yes, the defensive coordinator does have a Baltimore background. It's Joe Cullen, and Joe Cullen is going to do Baltimore things. You can count on him. He's going to take some chances to put pressure on this quarterback, okay? And he did last night. But to me, I think what you just said is so perfect, because Joe Burrow now is doing things and showing signs early in his second year, coming off major knee injury, that, look, if I'm the Bengals, I'm just telling you, Joe Burrow's played some good football in his first year and a month, all right? And obviously he had the knee injury. He's played some good football. That half of football last night tells me, if I'm a Bengals fan, if I'm Zach Taylor, I have zero doubts about Joe Burrow. And in fact, I know that he's going to be a top quarterback in the league for as long as we can keep him healthy.
By the way, Trenton Irwin, receiver out of Stanford, is the guy who made the screen.
Those
pick,
are the things that win you games. Those plays win games in the NFL. I always remember, Mike, early in my football writing career, I was covering the Giants. And Bill Parcells used to say that the bottom 8 or 10 guys on your roster, I don't know who it's going to be, but one or two of those guys during the course of the year will make the play that's going to win a game for you, if you're a good team. And it happens every week in the NFL. Who you can almost look at any game and say some guy you never heard of made a huge play in that game. And again, look, is that the biggest play of the game, that block, or that screen? It's not the biggest play. It is a winning play.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.